Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom, and today's episode is amazing. It's the perfect combination of driving to take your success to the next level, but also bringing in your energy, your knowing, and that peace and calm to help you co-create it. My guest today is a friend of mine. She's a powerhouse coach and speaker and multiple business owner. Moira Kucaba is here to join me, and she's delightful because she has that type A driven personality that says go, 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 but she also knows the power of presence and energy. And she's going to talk to us about listening to the whisper, which I absolutely love. Moira, I am so excited about our conversation. You know, we have talked offline as well, and we found that we're like these kindred spirits, right? These type A personalities who can go make all these great things happen with a lot of muscle, but we also have like this spiritual, presence being part of us that has contributed to so much success. So to have somebody on here that can speak to that is so just exciting for everyone to hear your perspective as well.
Well, I'm so honored and excited to be here. I mean, really, truly, when we met, I felt like I met kind of a carbon copy of myself. And there's not that many people out there in the world, just like you said, that are not only teaching one end of the spectrum or the other, but that are teaching both. And I truly believe that when I look back at my own success with myself, but my own success with coaching so many other women, it is that marriage of the high performer. And, we need to know how to time manage. We need to know how to manage our state. We need to know all of these productivity things, but we also really need all of that juicy inside spirituality stuff too, to balance that, to have true success. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people think that it is one or the other, like you said, that it's not both. What I mean, and this kind of a crazy question, but I want to throw this out there. What do you believe is more important? Like if for somebody who's out there and they're like, well, I have that like type A structured personality, grit and hustle and push, and I will outwork anybody, but I don't really do that woo-woo stuff. I don't really do the internal work. Or if you take somebody over here who's like, I think everything should just flow and there shouldn't be the grinding and the hustle, and I don't push anything. I just let things happen. I mean, if you put them side by side,
Yeah.
Which one's more important?
Gosh,
In your opinion?
I honestly think they are 50-50. I think you can have some success. My experience for my own personal self is that I definitely had a lot of success muscling through stuff, burnout, burning the candle at both ends, hustle, grind, like completely killing myself practically.
Yeah.
I definitely built, substantial businesses that way. And I think you can the other way as well. But at least from the burnout perspective, the type A go, 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 it is completely unsustainable. And you will absolutely crash and burn. And there's a ceiling on it, right? Like you will only get so far. And so, granted, I think even when I was born, there was some part of that understanding of the spiritual connection, of manifestation, of even the mindset part of like believing in the dream. Like I always say, you're not going to get what you want. You're going to get what you expect. You're going to get what you believe. You're going to get what you believe the outcome is going to be. So if you're pushing to some goal and you're hustling, but you're like, oh, just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, it's so hard for me to deliver the news to people that I'm mentoring. I'm like, it's not going to happen. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm doing everything you're telling me to do. And I'm like, yeah, but if you have that inner belief that it's just probably not going to happen, that also is going to win out, And so
for sure,
it is so important to fully understand both sides of that. And you're only going to get so far if you do one or the other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You just brought up something that is such a neat question I want to talk to you about. But I also, before we're going to get into your success, because I want people to understand your backstory and know what you have created and the success that you have had, both without kind of some of that grounding and then with it. But you just mentioned something that was really interesting. Like when you are in that place and you're doing everything that you can, but the belief isn't there, what do you think gets in the way for people to not have that belief? Like to me, a little bit of that surrender comes up. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes the people who want to muscle through everything, it's like it's their control. They're the ones who have to make it
Mhm.
happen. And is there a bit of this like surrender in just believing? I mean, I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, I love that you go to surrender because I just love talking to you in these conversations because we could just be like on the couch, like totally having this
Right.
conversation right now. My brain, my mind first goes to really the almost the neuroscience side of this. So I think for the people that I work with, most of the time, yes, Angie, like we know there is a surrender piece, right? But I think most of the time that unbelief comes from a narrative, it comes from a story, it comes from, you know that our brains are designed to look for danger and threats and
Hmm.
scarcity and where we might fail. So if our brains are constantly scanning our environment for that and grabbing onto that, it's looking for our brain will build a case against ourselves, right? Like
Right.
it's going to build the case for why it's not going to happen. And so I teach a system where you really have to be intentional, even if you're taking 5 minutes a day, writing down the reasons why it's actually possible, writing down, even looking back, right? You can look back over your whole life and think, why are you scared this thing isn't going to happen or you're not going to be able to accomplish this goal that you have in front of you?
Hmm.
Let's look back and look at all that you've overcome, all the successes that you've had. Let's focus on that and build that story and build the narrative so it serves you going forward versus our default mode is just like, I'm terrified, I'm not as good as she is, I'm not, and my personality's not as great, like I don't have the skill set, when it's like, actually, if you look, maybe you do have the skill set. So
Right.
I really believe wholeheartedly in just stacking the proof, stacking like the real concrete life evidence
Hmm.
that's going to serve you going forward, because we can build the story either way, right? We can stack all the reasons why, like, yep, this probably isn't going to happen because of these 10 things, or we can go and find the 10 things that if you list those, any outsider would go, well, of course, like this is inevitable. This is like not even hard, like this is going to happen for you. And when we choose to focus on that, that's when we start to feel the belief, right? We start to give
Right.
over into this vision. And you and I both know it's when we're living into that feeling of it actually being already ours is when it happens.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. And we're going to get into all that. I want to get into your system and everything for people.
Yeah.
But let's back up a little bit from a success
Yeah.
standpoint, because you have, I mean, you went from a certain point in your life where things were not so well, and
Mhm.
it then became, seven figure CEO. You were in $1 billion, multiple billion dollar company, top sales in there. So talk to me about some of those achievements along the way. And I
Yeah.
really want to understand, and I want listeners to understand, like, where were you in that place at that time? Like, did you have the spirituality, the groundedness? Were you more of that hustle and grind? So kind of compare and contrast some of those success marks for us
Yeah.
and where you were functioning.
Gosh, there's so much to unpack there. So
Yeah.
yes, so I was always, I think I was born into the world just driven, just, type A, Enneagram 3. We didn't have Enneagrams back then, but I can look back and go,
Yeah.
yep, I was type A, Enneagram 3. And then I found myself and in high school falling into addiction with alcoholism. It's in my
Hmm.
family, not my close family, but I know it was somewhere in my genetic tree. So I believe that I'm genetically predisposed to that. And like I do everything in my life, which is like all in, I also fell into that addiction very quickly, very deeply. Rock bottom, if I was to tell you kind of to go into that story, but we won't do that today. But by the time I was 21, I mean, it doesn't get, when you think of what most people think of an addict or an alcoholic, that was me. I mean, just 24/7,
Mm.
I was either blacked out, passed out, or using heavily, and there was no in between, and I could not find that middle ground. But
Mm.
by the grace of God, I got sober when I was 21. And so then I kind of was reborn to like, okay, I was supposed to be in med school at this point. Like, let me find my life again. And I think at that point, I picked back up my personality of, I'm gonna kind of make my mark in the world and figure it out. But and I was definitely on a spiritual path my whole life. But I picked that spiritual path back up in sobriety in the rooms of recovery. And, I did that for, I think, about probably 15 years. I built a successful business. It was multiple six-figure business. So I kind of just, muscled through it and grinded through it and built that business. But something happened at year 15. There was a huge shift in my personal, professional, spiritual, all the lives. And that really came from, yes, I had the hustle. Yes, I had some of those spiritual tools, but I didn't really understand my brain until I was 15 years in. I started to really unpack my identity, right? And my identity, but of course, as if you understand the world of recovery, my identity was very much, I'm a recovering alcoholic, I'm an addict. And I really had to look at, how is that serving me or not serving me? Because it was keeping me stuck in a lot of unhealthy patterns. And so I started to study the brain. I started to study, neuroscience, and I got certified as, in NLP. And I started to really understand so much of my addiction, so much of everything we do was simply a pattern in the brain. And it didn't mean I was a good person or a bad person. It was neutral. And I had the power to really rewrite that story, right? So I was able to, at that point in my life, step away from the shame that I was carrying, because I still felt like there was shame in that identity as an alcoholic and an addict. And, as I was just talking about, we can find the story that serves us or doesn't serve us. I truly started to unpack that. And I thought, wait a second, maybe I wasn't born an alcoholic, or I wasn't born an addict, and I wasn't born physically addicted, right? And so I thought, there is something in me, though, that I truly believe is different, little off, a little crazy. And that thing is really this part of my personality that is very driven, that is very all in, and the word was driven, that I could identify, that maybe I was born with this part of me that drives like crazy, that when I picked up alcohol, I drove down that road, right? When I picked up anything else, I ran with it. And I really, really, for the first time in my sobriety and in my life at around 35, I was like, I think the thing inside me that almost killed me is also the thing inside me that's building the $1 million business. And one of the things I teach over and over and over again is just to ask the question, how is this a gift? How is this a gift? Because every single thing that we think is going to hold us back, every reason we list for why we're not going to succeed, we can choose to switch that around and use that very thing that's going to hold you back to actually be the catalyst to move you forward. And that's what I was able to do at that point in my life. And man, I just took everything to a whole new level. In a year, 18 months, I was able to take, that 6-figure income to 7 figures. And I mean, it was just the radical success that was built so quickly came from this combination now of, you've got, a spiritual basis, but you've got the productivity, the hustle. And I started to refine even those things in the world of high performance. I needed to understand that I could work more efficiently and more effectively. I could use my time better. So I started to do all those high performance things, but I really started to understand the thoughts in my mind are controlling everything. They're controlling my confidence. They're controlling my feelings. They're controlling my actions. And if I can get a hold of that, I will be unstoppable. And it's funny because I look back, even, I feel like this is where like the divine part comes in, these little seeds that are planted. I can remember I sought out a therapist when I was probably maybe 24 years old. I had just moved to Charleston, South Carolina from California. And I remember walking in his office, and he kind of sat down and he said, "Hey, Moira, it's nice to meet you. Tell me why you're here." And I said, "I want to learn how to control the thoughts in my mind." Because even back then, 10 years prior, somewhere, somehow, I got that message that if I can get a hold of my thoughts and be the observer, right, and change the thought,
Mhm.
that was going to be a huge catalyst for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's everything, right? I mean, it really is. And that, even going back to the very first question we talked about, right? What's more important, that inner work of being able to catch those thoughts and choose differently changes your whole trajectory.
Yeah.
And, I wrote down like that cognitive reframing that you're sharing, that when you were, multiple six figures, and then you got to this place of going, I'm going to ask this question of, how is this a gift?
Yeah.
Constantly reframing what was happening
Mhm.
into this perspective of, it's a gift,
Yeah.
change everything. And so, as people are listening here, it wasn't this, well, I scaled my team and I did this and I did that and checked this box.
Yeah.
And it was like, you just changed your perspective. You changed the
Right.
way you looked at things and the information that you received and what you did with it.
Yeah.
It's just,
And doing that repeatedly
yeah,
as a high performer, of somebody that's driving a high performing team, that's building a 7-figure business, every single obstacle, every single, if I'm in a mentorship thread and somebody goes, ugh, da 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 da, I'm like, well, how is that a gift? How is that a gift? Even
yes,
down to the point where you're stuck in traffic and you think, ugh, and we have that negative thought. That negative thought creates negative energy, which means, I hate to break it to you, but your relationships, your business, your joy, every single thing just goes. And if you
yeah,
want a healthy body, if you want a healthy marriage, if you want a thriving business, even in the traffic, you have to go, wait a second. Actually, instead of being pissed off and angry and picking up the phone and yelling about this traffic and complaining to my spouse or complaining to my girlfriend, maybe I can go, wow, wait a second. I have an extra 20 minutes and I've been meaning to call my sister-in-law back and catch up. What a
hmm
gift. This is actually like, you truly can see it. You're not just convincing your own mind, but you are seeing the truth of turning every single negative emotion, right? So my kind of radar is like, negative emotion about something. How is this a gift?
yeah.
And it changes
It's
everything.
it really does, and I think it's catching it, right? For
Yeah.
most people, it's like, gosh, that happened. They had the negativity and they never even had the chance to stop it. I mean, not they didn't have a chance, but they didn't have the awareness to catch it and do something about it. I feel like that's always the first place to start, is going, how do you start catching this and being more aware? I
Yeah.
turn to presence, and really being here. But what's your take on that as people are trying to figure that out and listen?
Yeah. I think the more you do it, the easier it gets. I mean, I
Hmm.
think it's interesting, like when people come into my world and they start to live in my circle. I love Robin Sharma. It's a Robin Sharma quote. He always says, we become our conversations. It's like one of my favorite
Hmm.
things he says. And so when people kind of come into my world and the conversation is different and the conversation is very positive and people are operating from that standpoint of like, that happened. Okay, well, how can we navigate this? Maybe it's actually a gift. Maybe it's, there's just such a positive, and people are like, whoa, this is weird. And then they kind of go into their own personal lives. And the first thing that happens is they get wildly irritated with the rest of the world, right? And so
Yes,
they're
yes.
experiencing that negativity, and they start to become more and more aware the more that you're doing it. And I always say, because they're like, Moira, you're telling me that I need to see this as a gift, but I'm actually more irritated. And I say,
Hmm.
what a gift. That rub, I always say, it's contrast, right? Contrast equals clarity. So the second a
Hmm.
negative emotion comes up, I go, okay, contrast. What's the flip of this? Right. For instance, I remember when I first started to do this work, it sounds like the silliest example, but you know how we remember things when we first start? I remember things when I first
Yeah.
start to learn them because you're like locking them into your brain. I remember I was swimming in a pool. I was swimming laps, and I'm not a swimmer. I just, every once in a while, I love to swim. It's like the most glorious feeling in the world. And I was swimming laps. The sun was shining, palm trees. It was beautiful, like 75-degree day, which doesn't happen in Charleston that often. And I came up at the end of the pool, and the lady next to me was like, can I ask you a question? Does it feel slower to you? And I was like, I was like, huh? Like the water? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
but she was, what we bump up against in the world all day long, very negative people that just
Mm-hmm.
push our buttons. And I remember just saying something pleasant to her and like, oh, I don't really know. I don't swim that much. Like, I'm just here having, just having fun. And then I
Yeah.
dove under the water and I could have thought like, ugh, how dare you ruin my moment? But I just thought, there before the grace of God go I. I'm so glad that I'm not worried about the water being slowing me down.
Right.
It's
Right.
like in that moment, I had gratitude for my mindset and my experience, which was glorious, compared to
Mm-hmm.
her having the exact same physical experience and it was negative.
Yeah.
So it's how you're interpreting things, right? When you can say, and probably, and I will wrap up, but this is so important. I think one of the biggest things that I bumped up against when I first started to do this work was my own mom, who is
Mm.
extremely negative and judgmental. And
Mm-hmm.
every single time she would enter my space or on the phone, my buttons would be pushed. And I would be irritated before she even said anything because I was ready. And I instantly thought, wow, I am the way I am because she is the way she is. I am so non judgmental because she is my mom and she is so judgmental. I would never be who I am if it wasn't for her being the opposite. And from that moment on, every single time she came in, every single time she had a judgmental comment or a negative comment, which was all the time, it made me giggle. Like it
Yeah.
literally made me go from just wanting to strangle her to giggling and thinking, I would never be who I am if God didn't give me that as a mom. And I'm so grateful. I really became so grateful. And I would just kind of smirk every time that happened. I mean, talk about shifting a relationship.
Right.
Whew, powerful stuff.
Huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, the feeling that you get, right? Like, that's what I want people to understand too is like, oh, the peace that you get to walk around with when
Yes.
you choose, I like to say, kind of like the high line, right? Like there's
Yeah.
frequencies. And I want to
Mhm.
talk to you a little bit about energy because I literally just
Yeah.
had a client fresh from this morning come in
Yeah.
and he's actually in AA and he's on his fourth step right now. So he's writing about all the different resentments and
Yes.
his part and everything. So he's kind of like vibrating in this icky space right now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, and he's like, oh, and this goes wrong. And then this happened. And then this happened. And it's like this chain of events, and
Yeah.
I'm like, that's energy. That's energy.
Yeah.
Like you have to understand that if you're in this low vibration of energy
Mhm.
and in this ick of like all these negative things, it's just what you're going to be a magnet to. And more of it is
Absolutely.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, speak to me a little bit about that from your
Yeah.
perspective, because I hear you radiating it out there and everything I know about you already and our mutual friends and everything I watch about you. I'm like, man, she gets every bit of juice out of the
Yeah.
lime. I mean, like in life and just situations, your mom and all of that. So how do you stay in that high line frequency?
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, it's hard to stay there all the time, right? Like, and I can tell you who I am today. It doesn't even resemble the person I was, 10, 15 years ago, just dry. Like I was just like a tornado, like coming through, like, hard worker and I was edgy. I was very edgy. I had
Mm-hmm.
some rough edges and I just don't operate that way anymore. But it was habits that built over time. We can slowly but surely become somebody else in our brain, in our energy, everything. And so I always kind of compare it to, working out. Like we all understand if I go to the gym and work out every day, my body's going to change. My physical body is going to change. Well, if I go and do the mindset work every day for 10 or 15 or 30 minutes, literally my brain will change. I will become a different person. And when I look back on my sobriety and my addiction, I'm like, oh, I see what I did there. I was oblivious to it, but I rewired a brain that somewhere deep, deep, deep down, I believe that those neural pathways are still there. They don't go away forever. So that's why we say I will always be in recovery, right? But I've had 26 years of laying down neural pathways that say, I don't drink, I don't use drugs. And so that's who I am today, right? So it's this daily commitment. And so for me, that looks like things like a morning process, and we can dig into that. It looks like, if I still feel kind of off my game when I sit down to work, sometimes I'm like, I need to just like, I just need to get out of the house and go for a walk. And, there's so much power and move a muscle, change a thought, get my mind on something else. But again, it goes back to what am I focused on so often? If I'm kind of like, when I sit down at my computer, I'm like, well, what am I thinking about? Because it's whatever I'm thinking about is leading to the feeling. So I need to think about something different. Maybe I need to just plug in a podcast or sit down and read a few pages of a book that's going to shift me emotionally, turn some music on, do something. There's so many tools to just shift that vibration, but it's my belief that, I love a morning process. I love that there are a million of them on planet Earth, and you don't have to, there isn't a right morning process. What people don't understand is the point of the morning process isn't really the morning process. The point of the morning process for me is to shift from where I wake up to being up here. A lot of times life can kind of push us low vibration, low frequency, but most of the time when we wake up in the morning, we're pretty neutral. Sometimes we're not, sometimes we wake up anxious and things like that. But my job is to wake up in the morning and do whatever I need to do for my morning process to get into that place of gratitude, of wonder, of hope, of excitement, of anticipation. So I'm vibrating higher. Because if I don't do that, I'm making my life way harder than it needs to be. Because like we said, everything is unlocked there. All the synchronicities, oh my gosh, I was thinking about you and you just called, or I just happened to send a voice message to this person and they were like, I think about little things like this. Like I hadn't talked to a friend for a long time and I saw his little bubble pop up in Instagram and I was like, hey, how are you doing? And he's like, it's so crazy. You just messaged me. I was just thinking about you. I need a speaker for my event. And I'm like, okay, sure. I'll be there. You know what I mean? Like those little things that people are like, how do you get booked for these events? I'm like, well, I vibrate high and I do the work. It's the combination of, I teach something called the abundance formula. And I always say action plus attraction. So you have to take the action, but the attraction piece is where are you vibrating? What frequency are you in? Because there is a magical frequency where doors open, conversations happen, synchronicities come into your life all day, every day. And we can choose to live there every day if we want.
Yeah. It is a choice. It's some work. Right. Yes. But it's a choice. And I feel like that's kind of constantly what I'm trying to get people to see, and probably you too, right? Yeah. Is that it's an exchange. Yes, it's going to take some time out of your day. Not a lot, honestly, not a lot. I mean, you can make your morning routine as long as you want, but it's going to take some intentional effort, short amount of time every day. But the exchange and what you get for it, and I want to talk about this too in some of your like redefining that high performance words, the exchange and what you get, more time, more joy, more fulfillment. Like you can all of a sudden do everything that you were doing before, create even more exponential success in less time and less effort. And that's the switch that people need to see. I love that you said, kind of like, that intuitiveness, I call it, right? I do it all the time with clients where you're like, you reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, are you watching me? Like, how do you know to reach out? And it really is, I think everyone has a gift of intuitiveness if they create the space and operate in that frequency. We can all have that, but it doesn't happen in the chaos and the noise and in that kind of neutral or below the surface, right? Kind of turbulence there. I'm wondering for you though, I want to circle back with the high performance because that kind of perked up my ears a minute ago when you were talking about like redefining as a type A and as this achiever. And I know so many people that listen to this podcast are there, like redefining some of those words and how you still got to show up and take that action you just talked about, but bring in room for the being. and the
Yeah.
attraction part that you mentioned. So, what are some of those words you redefined and habits you gave up as that hustle and grind, all type A?
Yeah. So it's so interesting. And this is kind of where going back to the morning process that I practice, very similar to yours. And
Hmm.
what you just said, Angie, it's like we could hustle and grind for 8 hours a day, but we could literally move the needle as whatever we move the needle to in those 8 hours, we could choose to do that in two and have 6 hours to go to yoga, to meet a friend for coffee, to like we are so programmed as these type A high achievers to just go, 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 go. A perfect example, I was talking about this on my Instagram this morning. Last week, I had a meeting set with my business partner, maybe 2 o'clock. So that's a hard time to have a meeting, where you need to be fully present and you're exhausted from the day already. So we're like trying to text each other on the side to like prep for it. And she's in the middle of a million things and I'm in the middle of the things. And then I forgot I have to pick up a kid at 2 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm going to be a couple minutes late. Like we were both not operating up here, right? Because you
Hmm.
can't always operate from that space. And I could feel her energy and I could feel my energy. And we had to move the needle and have this meeting with a third party. And like my gut was like, don't do the meeting. This is not a good idea. And 5 minutes before, I was like, hey, and I was afraid she might be a little upset with me, but I was like, executive decision, we are not getting on this call. We are not getting on this call. This is when you're coming in, negative energy, and then we're irritated with the third party. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is not going to go good, right? We can do what we need to do via email, text message, back and forth, but you have to be very aware of your energy and waiting till you get to a place, maybe just a couple hours later, and maybe the next morning where you're in a different space. And then you come into the same meeting with the same tasks. And it's literally like those meetings where you're like, boom, boom, like divine thought, and things happen. And, oh, I've already got this. Like I can remember, I think I was having this conversation with you, like for years. I'm like, what am I going to do? What book am I going to write? And then one day it was like,
Yeah.
God just was like, hey, that 12-month mastermind that you've laid out for the last 5 years? That's the book. And I was like, oh, it's already written. Like, when you talk about how you have quantum leaps, right? Like
Hmm.
quantum leaps when you are operating up here. And that came from like a beach walk and a conversation with a friend where we were just on this spiritual high. And then I came home and it was like literally the book was already written. And
Hmm.
I had
Yeah.
been trying to figure it out for 3 years. I had written book proposals, Angie. I had written book proposals. I had sweated and tried and thought about it, smoke coming out my ears. And then I was like, oh, yeah, it's actually already written. I mean,
Because we're
quantum
trained,
leap. Yeah.
right? Trained to like, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard,
Yes.
right? As an
Yes.
overachiever, as a challenger, it's like if it's not hard, then
Mhm.
is it valuable? Did I really do it? And so I almost hear you saying that one of those redefining words for you was really stop just pushing
Yes.
and really, maybe
Receive.
pause, presence, receive.
And receive is
Yeah.
tricky for me, right? As a doer, as an action
Yeah.
taker, as a high achiever, I don't mean receive as in don't take action. I
Hmm.
mean take the action, let go of the results, and receive what comes back, right? Like we as women are receivers. And, for a decade, I wasn't receiving much. I was just doing, 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 doing.
Yeah.
And so it's like receiving, allowing, flow. And for me as an achiever, I really had to understand and study that. To me, what was so important is I was going to achieve more up here, right? Because the
Hmm.
fear for an achiever is if I shift, I'm going to achieve less. And
Right.
so I can remember, and this sounds, sorry, can you hear barking dogs? Sorry, this is real life.
That's just part of the live real life
Yes,
thing going
I
on
always
here.
forget to put them outside. But this is kind of funny, but this was probably, I don't even know if this was maybe 7 years ago. But I was having such a hard time fitting meditation in. It didn't fit into my morning process. It didn't feel like something that felt good to wake up and do, right? So it was like, that's not jiving. That's not energetically lining up. But I understood the magnitude of meditation or visualization or
Mm-hmm.
even just, closing your eyes and breathing for 10 minutes. And so
Yeah.
I started to put it into the afternoon after I'd worked a full day and I was going to go get my kids. But I, as the achiever, had to put it on my checklist so I could check the
Mm-hmm.
box. And so sometimes I had to kind of play some games with myself to go, you know what,
Yeah.
in order for me to achieve this other side, it has to feel like an achievement. And the reality
Right.
is, every single time I sat down to meditate at 2:30, I fell asleep. So really, I was just napping,
Yeah.
but I was able to check the box and I felt like I was achieving, right? But that's kind of
I'll
what we need
argue
to
you were
do.
still getting benefits.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I knew
Yes.
I was getting benefits. I needed a nap more than anything.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that makes me think of our conversation. Remember, we were talking about meditation versus hypnosis.
Yes,
And I was like, well, the hypnosis is like intentional meditation, right?
yes,
Like now
yes.
we're doing something. So again, right? The challenger, the driver, the achiever is like, what are we getting out of this? I want the
Yeah.
most out of these things. And I hope that's what people are learning as we have this conversation is that you can still be the driver and the
Hmm.
achiever and the challenger, but take away some, to use your words, take away some of those, rough edges
Yeah.
and really let it work for you. Step
Yeah.
into the space where your gifts and your presence and your mindset and all that starts to work.
Yes.
I want to, and you may not have an answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
I like to give people a belief. Now, I know they need to kind of choose their own belief, but you and I both know that without changing a belief, then the action doesn't usually come and we don't get the results. So, for people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm totally resonating with this, I'm that driver, I'm the one who has to keep hustling, grinding, and I feel like if I tweak that, results are going to go down. Did you have a standing belief that you leaned into back then that you constantly reinforced to tell yourself that things were going to be better if you trusted this process and you leaned in?
I think it was just the everyday proof. I think every
Mm,
single person listening thinks it's just coincidence. It's just life. We can ask your audience, have you ever woken up, spilled your coffee, gotten stuck at every red light, done it's like one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. You hit the traffic jam, like nothing's going your way. And you're like, well, that was just life that day. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. You were
mm,
operating at a frequency down here, and vice versa. Have you ever woken up and you're just like, oh my gosh, I just, randomly walked into this person and we had this great conversation and they told me about a job opportunity and then this happened and somebody paid for my coffee, and it's like just miracle after miracle after miracle. If you really start to identify it, no, every single person can attest to the fact that when they feel this, when they feel higher vibe, miracles happen. It's like magic is in the air. And so you just have to look at your own experience. Yes, you will think it's coincidence over and over and over and over again, but you can't help but start to believe it if you look closely enough. Yeah.
right. Yes. I cannot, I'm drawing a blank on the author right now, but he talks about that, about the coincidences that happen. And he was like, you can call them coincidences, but just recognize how, as you start to lean in this, those coincidences start happening more and more
Yeah.
frequently,
Yes.
And so you can call
Yes.
it what you want, but there's
Yes.
definitely an attraction there. So just really seeing the proof and leaning into that and calling it what it is. I love that.
Yes.
Okay. So give
Absolutely.
us a tangible here. Talk about either your morning process or I'm torn. So you take me where you want to go here, either with your high vibe morning process or because you said some wonderful words in there that I was like, ooh, the wonder, the hope,
Yeah.
that type of thing, or that whole attraction, action and attraction. I want
Yeah.
them, people listening to walk away with like, ooh, this is what I'm going to take action on.
Yes. So I I'm it's going to encompass both. So I want to chat through the
Okay.
morning process because it absolutely encompasses the action and the attraction. And I also want to say, and some people might be like, whoa, that she just went woo on me. But like when I went from really struggling in finding my purpose, finding my, like, what was I going to do with my life? I had sold one company and I was like, what in the world? I can't find like a passion. And, because of all that angst, like my kids were little, momming was hard. My marriage was hard. Like I was 15 pounds heavier. And then like 18 months later, I'm like, oh, I'm making $1 million a year. I'm in the best shape of my life. My husband's great. And I love my kids. So I had to really go, what in the heck am I doing to have that kind of a life transformation? It was radical. And it wasn't just me. I was mentoring other women and I was seeing the same exact radical transformation happening in their lives. And so I really had to just look at what I thought was just my silly little cute process that I was just doing and kind of like whispering to my friends, and then they're doing it. And so I never, ever, ever, ever at that point was like, I want to write a book or be a published author, because I was like, I've got a giant 7-figure business I'm trying to run. The last thing I'm trying to do is anything else. But I felt the whisper. I always say, listen to the whisper. And to me, that's God. Some people call it their intuition, their gut instinct. To me, it was God that was like, you can't keep this to yourself. You have to share this with the whole world. It's just not okay that you're not sharing this with other people. And so I did end up putting it into just a morning process journal. And so it's actually being rewritten right now, but the vibe. So if we're talking about being high vibe is actually the result that we're looking for. And we break down VIBE. Okay. So I start every single day and I can go back to that 7-figure year back in, 2015, 2016, 2015. Yeah. 2015. Is that right? I'm like, you lose track of years when you're around 48. But back then,
trust me, I know.
I'm like, what's my name? Perimenopause, such a gift, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, things we forget. But I would wake up every morning, and I've done this literally every morning since. I have followed the same flow. And so it encompasses everything we're talking about: spirituality, my brain, the action, the imagination. So I start with visualization. So at bare minimum, you're just writing out the vision for your life, your goals, and you're reading it. That's how I started. I simply didn't mean to do that. Nobody told me this was a smart thing to do. I had written out a vision one day in like an exercise in a mentorship thing. And I had just slid it into the book that I was reading every morning. And so the next morning I just read it first thing in the morning, and it literally just felt hopeful. It felt good. It felt like, oh yeah, that's the dream. That's why I'm working hard. That's why I'm going to get outside of my comfort zone. That's why I'm going to manage my time, right? And I didn't realize how powerful that simple practice was, to read your vision every day. We do it on January 1st. We stick it on a bookshelf. We tell our friends while we're at a weekend workshop, and then our brains literally forget. It gets washed away. And so every morning I read my vision. I visualize it as well. So I close my eyes and I just take a minute or two on that mental movie screen to see it come to life, right? So that's the V. The I is something I'm super passionate about. So I call it Inquire to Rewire. So this is how we rewire our brains. When I work with people, and I'm a little bit of a tough love coach, and people call me and they're like, hey, I'm struggling. And I'm like, are you doing your morning process? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, call me when you are. Because if you're doing this, you're not going to be struggling. Because when we ask ourselves every day, how am I winning? What am I proud of myself for? If we are literally looking for the proof that we are winning on a daily basis, that's what we see, that's what we feel, that's what we attract, right? We don't do that. We feel the opposite. Our brains see how we're not winning, and we feel how we're not winning. And then we call our mentor and say, I'm struggling. It is night and day difference, right? So inquire to rewire. When you ask yourself a different question, you get a different answer. So that's the I. And then I love the B, because I say, just for a moment, breathe and connect. Now, for me, that's to God. For others, that can be just connecting with your intention, maybe for the day, right? But just if we all just took 60 seconds to shut our eyes in the morning and to take a few deep breaths and to connect with what I call source energy, God. Wayne Dyer used to always talk about this visual of being on a trolley in San Francisco. Just reach up and grab the trolley strap.
Mm,
Just breathe. And I just say a quick little prayer, work through me, help me see what you want me to see, be who you want me to be, hear what you want me to hear, meet who you want me to meet. Just, it's 30 seconds, but breathe and
yeah.
connect. And then the E in vibe, which so few people do, you have to execute. Meaning the journal prompts you, what are the 3 most important things I have to do today? Every single person that says they can't manage their time or they're overwhelmed or they have the story of being bad at time management, I always say, just start with what are the 3 most important things I need to do today and write down what time you are doing them. Because that's the mistake most of us make. We know what we have to do, but we don't decide when we're doing it. It's like, well, if you had to go to the doctor for, a heart test, would you just not have an appointment? Like, it's really important. You would have an appointment and you would go to the doctor at 2:00. So like when we define what are the 3 most important actions in my day, we have to identify what time we are executing on them. And I go way deep into time management, but just start there, because I have 25 things to do on a list, but every day I go, okay, that's all great, but what are the 3 most important things? And I do them first.
I love it. Oh my gosh, so easy to remember vibe. We have our
Yeah.
vision, we have our inquire to rewire, we have that breathe and connect and the execute.
Yep.
I wanted to share them again so that as people were listening, if they need to rewrite them or hit rewind and listen to them again, because you've got it all in here. You've got that mental picture to start to create the belief. You've got, that breathing to get grounded, the questions. I mean, there's just so many good pieces that start to activate for our neuroscience brains, right? That reticular activating system, that prefrontal cortex, where
Yep.
you have all these wonderful things in your brain that are there to help you.
Yeah.
But if we're not activating them in the morning, then it's like we're doing it the harder way. So
Yes.
what a
Absolutely.
beautiful process. I
Oh,
love it. How long does it take you?
I mean, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. It depends on how
Oh,
long I sit in the visualization.
yeah.
So on a kind of a busy day where I'm like, okay, I got to get my morning process in, get in the gym, and then wake the kids up, maybe 10 minutes. I love to sit in like a juicy morning routine for 30 minutes if I
Yes.
can. But not every day
Yeah.
looks that way. And to me, it's non-negotiable. I mean, if I
Hmm.
wake up late and I've got 20 minutes to work out or 20 minutes for my morning process, it is my morning process, because I always joke, like, my biceps aren't going to help me in my business. My biceps aren't helping me with my children. My biceps aren't helping me in my marriage. Like, I need this
Yeah.
way more than I need to work my muscles. So, yeah.
I love that you brought that up, because oftentimes, and I'm not to judge, but some people say you have to move your body. Like that has to be the primary thing that fuels everything else. I tend to believe that the mind,
Mhm.
right, is kind of that gateway. That's what gets me to move the body and everything. But I know that health is hugely important to you. I mean, you have such a long history in that
Yeah.
space and still currently. So,
Yeah.
talk about that for just a minute. I know that we're kind of getting to a wrap up here, but give us
Yeah.
some wisdom around how important that health foundation is to everything else, to relationships, your wealth, everything else going on in your life.
Yeah. I love this question because, I was in the health and wellness industry and still am, but primarily just that for decades. And I remember pivoting into really mental performance and business coaching and loving that. And I was like, gosh, you can't leave the health piece, right? Like, you can't walk away from that, because your physical body is your vehicle. It's at the foundation of everything. And if you think about it, if I was to wake up and have, a high fever or food poisoning, and then I was like, I'm going to wake up and be this magical high vibe being that's, doing my morning process and eliciting all these, high level emotions, it's physically not possible if you have food poisoning or a high fever, right? Like, it's so, and here's the thing, we do that every single day. If we're eating fast food, if we're putting chemicals in our body, if we're not moving our body. So as much as I was wanting to like pivot away from health I was like, this is just so foundational to
Mm-hmm.
manifestation, right? Like if I want to talk about manifestation and success and high achievers, I mean, there aren't, I'd say if you look at the world of high achievers, most of them are in pretty darn good shape because they go hand in hand, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
to the point that, when you show up for a workout every day and you're like, I don't want to show up for a workout, or you push one more rep, or you sweat, or your mind's like, oh, this is so hard, and you keep going. It is so cliche to say, but I used to always say, how you show up in your workout is literally how you show up the rest of the day. Like, because it is your mind muscle, right? This is hard, but I'm going to push through. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to push through. Well, the same thing with this marriage is hard, but I'm going to push through. I don't want to go do this,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to go do it. It's coming from the same mental space. So how much you push yourself physically is how much you're going to be able to do on the other side of your life as well. So, I ended up partnering with a peptide company, not injectables. I don't have any negative opinions. I'm not getting on, I'm not jumping into the middle of that debate. I think injectable peptides are amazing for a lot of people. And I know that they're here to stay, and there's a lot to celebrate about that. I think there's a lot of things we don't know about injectable peptides, and we need to kind of do a little bit more research. But I partnered with a company that we launched last year, that's nature-based peptides, non-injectable, and talk about something that excited me as somebody that's been in health and wellness for so long. Something that's so cutting edge that we can give our bodies, that we can supplement in a natural way. And man, they have completely changed my body, my health, my energy. And I've been able to see that for countless other people. So it's a very exciting thing to be a part of. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I didn't even know if we would go down that road talking about that. I mean, that's one of the original ways that we connected outside
Yeah.
of, say, so many of our friends
I
going,
totally
how have
forgot
you two
about that,
never met
Angie.
before?
Yeah.
But yes, that's how I originally, I think I came across you, was through the peptides. And
Yep.
I never, ever, ever, like, I can't think of one, like, I don't even want to say diet, but anything that I've ever latched onto like that. Any product, company, or anything. And for some reason, it was like, I think I was watching one of your videos or something, and I was like, she seems pretty normal and she looks really good. And, it was the strangest, because there's so much of that stuff out there, and never,
Yeah.
ever, ever, ever looked into one. And it was funny because once I did, and then Dar's like, you and Moira don't know each other. And Tiffany's like, what? How does that, everyone was like, how are you two not connected?
Yes.
It's funny. We have that connection too. And I think I've been on them for like 3 months,
Yeah.
maybe 2 to 3 months. And
Yeah.
just absolutely love it. I love
Yeah.
that there's something to pair with, like you said, kind of that mentality and being healthy that translates to your relationships, your energy, your
Yes.
wealth, your creation, all of that. It just is like
Yeah.
the perfect little
Yeah.
piece there.
Absolutely.
So good.
Especially for our demographic, right? It's like, it can be such a struggle. It can be such a struggle. And I was struggling for really the first time in my life physically, doing everything suggested and just really feeling like I was going in the wrong direction. And never did I
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
expect a supplement to change things. And I
Right.
will say, I don't believe in a magic pill. At all. I think you still have to do all the lifestyle changes. But when you're doing all the lifestyle changes and things aren't moving in the right direction, if you understand how peptides work in your body, they really can be the unlock that just shifts everything. And, that's what I found for me and countless others. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you, because it's at that place where you're like, wait, I'm eating what I'm supposed to be eating. I'm doing the workouts. I'm like, what am I missing? And
Yeah.
if you're not getting what you want and doing all that work, it becomes frustrating, and
Yes.
that becomes a slippery slope of like, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this because it's who I am and it's integrity and
Right.
it's what's good for me. But like, how long do you keep doing what you're doing without getting the
Yeah.
result that you want?
Absolutely.
And so much of that maybe is tied to age. You're talking about 48, and
Yeah.
I'm going to be 51 in December. I said to my trainer today, I was like, okay, so you have 4 months. He's like, 4 months. I'm like, like last year, right before my 50th birthday, I decided I wanted to be in the best shape of my life when I was 50. I decided a little too late, but then I realized, you know what? I didn't say win 50. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it could be the last day of my 50th year, so
Absolutely. I love that. Well, you look amazing, but I
I'm
love
on a
the
mission.
narrative.
Thank you.
Yes. So good. So good.
Yes. We get these messages and sometimes they're just a little bit off,
Yeah.
like the shape of when I'm 50, not the day I turn 50, the day before I turn 51. So
Yes.
it's that beautiful
Yes.
cognitive reframe that we get to do with things, right?
Yes. Yes.
I love
Absolutely.
it. Oh my goodness. This has been such a good conversation. Wrap me up with one thing. And I hope you didn't have a hard stop because I just didn't even let you
No.
go. I'm sorry.
Nope. I don't have a
Wrap
hard
me
stop.
up with one thing here as people are listening and going, oh my gosh, I want more of Moira. I want to know what she's doing. One, give me one thing. Like, I love the vibe. So if it's the morning vibe, then that's it. But if there's something different, the one thing that people should start doing right now to create a change in their life into the space
Mhm.
that you and I know creates so much good energy and presence, all that.
Yeah.
One thing there, and then where's the best place for people to follow you along? Because I know
Yeah.
you have a lot out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So gosh, I mean, I say this over and over and over again because it is so my truth. It's really when I do look back on my whole life. And my mom used to always be like, I don't know how you do it, but you always land on your feet. And, I can look at how has all of this success come to be? How have I happened into these, areas in my career? How have I, fallen into these relationships with people? How have I gotten on that stage? Like, how in the world did I end up on Times Square? Like, what in the heck? And I can bring it back to one single thing. Listen to the whisper. I have
Mm.
listened to the whisper thousands of times when every person, every mentor, every family member, everyone in my life is like, that makes no sense. Do not do that. And something is like, I got to go do that. I got to move across the country. I got to close that business and take a leap of faith into this other thing. I need to go on that trip. I need to whatever. Every single day, I believe that whisper is literally guiding us down to the simple things of like, should I go right or should I go straight? It is
Mm-hmm.
guiding us, it is shaping our life, and we are usually just hell bent on self will. And the more that we can tune into that whisper, I always say the whisper is the way. And I believe that when we are operating in a higher vibration, we are just that much more attuned to the guidance. And that
Mm-hmm.
has been everything in my life. Everything. I think about my kids getting ready to decide on colleges and where they're going to play sports and, dating and all of this. I'm like, it just boils down to like the knowing in your soul, the whisper, I mean, college is such a great example of like, well, this doesn't look like what we wanted, but mom, it feels like home. Well, then that's where you're going. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, don't let a pros and cons list ever outweigh that knowing in your soul, because it has guided me and led me to the craziest things. And I am a risk taker, so I'm not afraid to leap. And usually the bigger the leap, the bigger the reward. So that's what I would end with. And then in
Mm.
order to find me, I'm mostly on Instagram. So that's where I kind of show up on a daily basis. I'm the one on my stories, in my DMs. You don't get my assistant or anything like that. So you can message me there. My website's moirakucaba.com, but mainly on Instagram. Yeah.
I love it. I think you just titled our podcast. Listen
Yeah.
to the whisper. I think that's what it is. I
Yep.
just love that. And I could take this whole conversation somewhere else because I think that we have to have self-trust in order to really listen to that whisper.
Yeah.
Another conversation, but like, yeah, it's just the best. You brought me to a special place as you were saying that. I'm like, oh, that whisper. I love that whisper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So knowing and so guiding. So y'all
Yes.
listen to the whisper
Mhm.
and follow Moira out there and learn all the good stuff about her. I mean, you're always up to something amazing, whether it's being with a great company in peptides or a mastermind or, your podcast out there too, High Vibe Life. So there's just so many good things out there. So
Thank
grateful to
you.
know you and have you as my friend. And we're going to see each other soon. I know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just as grateful. Thank you so much, Angie, for your friendship and having me on the show.
Thanks, Moira.
Awesome.